I beat myself up every night I lay down. Those are Tristan Shepard's words, the friend at the center of this title. ABC News describes Shepard as biracial, and Shepard says Nolan was his best friend. But here's where this gets complicated, because Shepard isn't claiming he saw Nolan die. He wasn't even there for Nolan's final moments. What he is doing is something different. He is challenging one huge piece of this story and replacing it with another version, a version that raises entirely different questions. According to Shepard, that disturbing viral video, the one people thought involved Nolan, wasn't Nolan at all. Shepard says the shouting voice was his. The fight, he says, involved him, not Nolan. And then Shepard makes another crucial claim. He says Nolan deliberately stayed on Horn Island. According to Shepard, Nolan had met a girl. Nolan supposedly wanted to stay with her and planned to leave on another boat. That sounds like a simple explanation, until you put everything beside it. Because Nolan's parents don't accept that explanation. Their attorneys say another witness gave another account, an account suggesting Nolan intended to leave. Then there is Nolan's phone, his keys. The unanswered question of who saw him last. And the biggest problem of all, Tristan Shepard left Horn Island before Nolan disappeared. So think about what that means.
Javon, I want to come to you because you're his friend. You were on the island on the 4th. You were on a different boat. Do you recall seeing him at all that day?
Yes, ma'am. I did see him when I was out there on the island.
Can you tell me what you saw? Does anything seem strange to you about the difference that people are saying of how he was separated from the group?
No, ma'am. I don't think that Nolan would say, hey, bro, I'm staying with this girl on the island.
Javon, tell me about your best friend, your childhood friend, Nolan.
Nolan was just a guy that if you were feeling down, he's going to put a smile on your face. He always found a way to make me laugh, even though he was getting on my last nerve. But I always love him, man. Like, that guy was, like, he was a blessing. Like, Nolan literally did everything with me. Like, if he wasn't going somewhere, I wasn't going somewhere. If I was going, he was going. Like, we were just, like, we were literally like brothers. Like, honestly, like, we did everything. We talked every day.
Javon, tell me about your best friend, your childhood friend, Nolan.
Nolan was just a guy that if you were feeling down, he's going to put a smile on your face. He always found a way to make me laugh, even though he was getting on my last nerve. But I always love him, man. Like, that guy was, like, he was a blessing. Like, Nolan literally did everything with me. Like, if he wasn't going somewhere, I wasn't going somewhere. If I was going, he was going. Like, we were just, like, we were literally like brothers. Like, honestly, like, we did everything. We talked every day. We could be, like, he'll be at college. I was still in high school. We'd come back down, still have the same bond. Like, always, we will always have that brotherhood relationship.
What has it been like now in this last week alone?
It's been hard, honestly. Like, it's really stressful. Like, with everything that's been going on, it's just, it doesn't feel real. Like, it just hurts really bad. And I just wish things were differently. Like, it's hard because things don't add up. And I wish I could just, talk to my best friend every day again. And I can't do that anymore. And it just hurts so bad. And I feel like people will just, on the internet, just running with narratives that they don't know, saying I was the last to leave them. If I was last to leave Nolan would still be with us today. And I think that's something that's been on my mind so much lately, because with everything I've been going through, it's just like, how can y'all blame me for this? Like, that was my brother. Like, y'all don't know me. Like, that was literally my best friend. And it's just so hard, honestly. And I just miss him every day. But I'm also so grateful to have him even as a friend, honestly. He was such a blessing.
The person now explaining what really happened can only explain what happened before he left. Everything after that is still the part nobody has explained. And right now, that distinction matters more than ever, because Nolan's case is still active. His independent autopsy lists his death as undetermined, The state findings remain publicly unresolved. And just this week, members of the Congressional Black Caucus asked Justice Department officials to consider an independent federal review. The FBI is already assisting local investigators. So no, this interview did not solve Nolan Wells' death, but it may have changed the questions. And one of those questions could change how you see Horn Island completely. Because before Shepherd spoke publicly, one video had become enormously important. You've probably seen some version of it. People standing near the water. Voices carrying across the island. Someone yelling. People apparently trying to restrain somebody. And because the footage is distant, because the audio is difficult, people began interpreting what they thought they heard. Nolan's family attorney, Ben Crump, said Nolan appeared to be among the group, and that Nolan could be heard, asking for his phone. If that interpretation were correct, think about the implication. Nolan's phone becomes more than forgotten property. The video becomes more than random chaos. Suddenly you would have Nolan, apparently involved in some kind of confrontation, shortly before he never came home. That is why the clip mattered. But then Shepherd stepped forward and said something extremely specific. That's me yelling, not Nolan. Him. Shepherd told ABC News. There was no discussion about Nolan's phone. According to his account, he was the one involved in the confrontation. He says another man started fighting him, and the people seen restraining someone. We're trying to stop Shepherd from continuing it. ABC reported Shepherd said Nolan wasn't in that video. Notice this. That is not a small correction, because there are two separate questions here. Was that viral video evidence of Nolan fighting? That is one question. What happened to Nolan afterward? That is an entirely different question. Shepherd's statement might weaken one theory. It does not automatically establish another. And that difference is critical, because online investigations often make this mistake. One claim gets disproven, so the opposite claim suddenly becomes the truth. But evidence doesn't work like that. If Nolan wasn't fighting in that video, that does not prove Nolan accidentally drowned. If the voice wasn't Nolan's, that does not prove nothing happened later. And if Shepherd's version is accurate, it only tells us what that video wasn't. It still doesn't tell us what killed Nolan. Now listen closely to what Shepherd says next, because this is where his account becomes important. Shepherd says the group had been drinking. He says hundreds of people were around them. He describes multiple boats, people moving around the island, friends coming together throughout the day. Then, according to Shepherd, the boat connected to their group needed to leave. He says there was an electrical problem, and this is the moment where Nolan supposedly made a decision. According to Shepherd, Nolan wanted to remain on Horn Island. Why? Because he had met a young woman. Shepherd told ABC News. Nolan seemed to really like her, and the expectation, according to Shepherd, was that Nolan would return with another group. That version generally aligns with what Sheriff John Ledbetter said. Investigators had been told by witnesses that Nolan chose to remain behind, believing he had another ride back. That is Shepherd's account. Not a court finding, not an autopsy conclusion, not a proven reconstruction. His account. And Nolan's family disputes the central premise, because according to Nolan's parents, voluntarily separating from his group like that didn't make sense to them. There's another reason they question it. The phone. Nolan supposedly chooses to remain behind, yet his phone leaves without him. His car keys leave without him. And Nolan remains on an undeveloped barrier island, accessible only by boat. Now you might hear that and immediately think something suspicious happened. Don't jump there yet, because Shepherd offered an explanation for the phone, and you have to hear his explanation fairly. He says leaving phones on boats was normal. People were spending time in salt water. According to Shepherd, Nolan put his phone on a boat dashboard, with many other phones. He asked a practical question. Why carry your phone into salt water when everyone you came with is already there? That explanation is plausible on its face, and ABC reported Shepherd told investigators his account. Sheriff Ledbetter also said Nolan's friends had cooperated. But now comes the friction. Because the phone did not become important, simply because Nolan left it behind. It became important because of what happened later. Nolan's mother used an app to locate the phone after he disappeared. According to reporting from the Associated Press, she later noticed some messages appeared deleted. That does not establish who deleted anything. It does not establish when anything disappeared. It does not establish criminal conduct. And it certainly doesn't prove homicide. But it creates an evidence question. What exactly was on Nolan's phone? What data existed before Horn Island? What existed after? What was deleted automatically by applications? What was manually removed? And can forensic extraction establish the difference? Those questions require digital evidence, not social media interpretation. Nolan's family and local prosecutors eventually agreed to conduct a mutual inspection of the phone, using experts from both sides. The district attorney has also said, the completed investigation will go before a grand jury, which ABC reported is standard procedure for most unnatural or suspicious deaths there. Now ask yourself something. If Shepard wanted simply to defend his friends, why publicly put himself inside that viral fight? Because think about what he admitted. He wasn't saying nothing happened. He was saying something did happen. He just says Nolan wasn't part of it. Shepard places himself in the confrontation. He says he was drinking. He says he got into a fight. He says people restrained him. And according to his later interview, that fight ultimately contributed to him leaving. That admission matters, not because it makes Shepard suspicious. There is no public evidence establishing that. It matters because portions of his account can potentially be tested. Was Shepard the voice in the video? Were the people there restraining him? Can witnesses identify the other man? Do other videos show the same confrontation? What time was that footage recorded? And most importantly, where was Nolan when that confrontation happened? Those are investigable questions, not theories. And Shepard says he gave investigators his version. Here is where things become even more uncomfortable. Shepard repeatedly describes Nolan as his best friend. He says they knew each other from high school. He says athletics helped bring them together. He described Nolan as somebody you automatically felt comfortable talking to. Later, speaking with Brandon Tatum, Shepard's emotion became even more direct. I beat myself up every night I lay down. He wondered whether things might be different, if he had stayed, whether he could have convinced Nolan to leave, whether his presence could have changed something. That is guilt. But be careful with that word. Guilt does not mean criminal guilt. People experience survivor guilt. People replay decisions after someone dies. People ask themselves impossible questions afterward. Nothing publicly released establishes Shepard harmed Nolan. And Shepard has denied wrongdoing. But his statement reveals something important. Even Shepard understands. There is a missing period he cannot explain. Because if he truly believed every question was answered, why wonder whether staying might have changed the outcome? That isn't proof of anything. It is simply part of what he said. And it brings us back to the weakest part of every public explanation. Nobody has publicly explained Nolan's final transition. We have explanations for why he stayed. We have explanations for why his phone stayed behind. We have explanations for one viral fight. But those explanations stop. Then Nolan is dead. That missing bridge is what investigators still have to establish. And Shepard cannot build that bridge, because Shepard says he left. Notice this. The most important thing Shepard revealed may not be something he saw. It may be where his knowledge ends. He can tell you about the fight. He can tell you about the phone. He can tell you about the girl. He can tell you what Nolan supposedly planned. But once Shepard leaves Horn Island, someone else becomes more important. Whoever actually remained around Nolan. And that is where the case changes. Because Nolan's family says another account exists. According to the Associated Press, investigators were told Nolan chose to stay. But Crump has said another witness reported that Nolan planned to leave with his friends. Those statements cannot both describe the exact same decision in the exact same way. Maybe someone misunderstood Nolan. Maybe Nolan changed his mind. Maybe people spoke to him at different moments. Maybe memory changed after the panic began. All of those possibilities exist, but the contradiction itself is real. One version has Nolan intentionally staying. Another has Nolan expecting to leave. And until investigators reconcile those accounts, the phrase, "he chose to stay behind," should not be treated as a settled fact. Now, consider the young woman. Because she has become central without becoming a public suspect. That distinction matters. According to Shepard, Nolan met her that day. He believed Nolan wanted more time with her. But Crump has publicly said, another account suggests Nolan intended to leave. The Guardian also reported that Crump said, the young woman indicated Nolan decided to return with his friends. Again, that does not mean the woman did anything wrong. There is no public evidence supporting that conclusion. It means her recollection could help establish what Nolan actually intended to do. Stay? Leave? Find another boat? Return to his original group? Those sound like tiny differences. They aren't, because the entire accidental separation explanation depends on Nolan knowingly choosing to remain behind. If Nolan clearly told multiple people, "I'm staying, I have another ride," that strengthens one interpretation. If Nolan was actually trying to leave, that creates a different investigative problem. Not proof of murder. A different problem. Who believed he had left? Who believed he was staying? Who last physically saw him? And when people began leaving, who believed Nolan was somebody else's responsibility? Think about the mechanics for a second. An island crowded with hundreds of people, multiple boats, friends moving between groups. Alcohol, according to Shepard. Phones left aboard boats. People swimming. People preparing to leave. A fight breaks out. Some people leave early. Nolan allegedly wants to stay. Other people apparently believe he'll get another ride. Now remove hindsight. Nobody standing there knows that Nolan will soon be missing. That kind of environment can produce confusion. It can also destroy certainty. And that is why investigators need original evidence. Not enhanced TikTok audio. Not edited clips. Not slowed down reposts. Original files. Original timestamps. Original metadata. Original witness accounts. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office has specifically asked for original photos and videos from Horn Island, and for eyewitnesses who observed arguments, disturbances, or unusual activity to come forward. Investigators say the case remains active, but this is also why Shepard's interview matters, because he doesn't merely defend the group. He gives investigators a list of testable claims. The viral voice was his. Nolan wasn't involved in that fight. The phones were left aboard intentionally. The boat had an electrical issue. Nolan met a girl. Nolan wanted to stay. Nolan expected another ride. Shepard left before Nolan disappeared. Every one of those statements can potentially collide with another source. Video, phone records, boat records, witnesses, messages, location data, the young woman's account, other people who heard Nolan speak. And that is how you should evaluate Shepard. Not by deciding whether you like him. Not by reading his facial expressions. Not by deciding what grief should look like. Ask whether the evidence supports his claims. Because Nolan's parents themselves have added another uncomfortable layer. They say they never met Shepard. Christine Wansley acknowledged that Nolan and Shepard may have become close during high school, but she questioned descriptions of him as Nolan's childhood or best friend. "We've never met him," she said. She also said the family wasn't automatically dismissing everything Shepard had told the public. That matters, because this case now contains two separate disputes involving Shepard. First, what happened on Horn Island. Second, how close he actually was to Nolan. Neither dispute proves Shepard is lying. People have close friendships their parents know very little about, especially teenagers and young adults. But when someone's closeness becomes part of why viewers should trust their interpretation, the relationship itself becomes relevant context. And Shepard has provided photos and described years of friendship. His parents' lack of familiarity with Shepard does not erase that possibility. It simply means best friend is Shepard's description of the relationship, not something Nolan's parents independently confirm. Here's the question we're sitting with today. And it's not whether Tristan Shepard looks guilty. There is no public basis for making that accusation. The question is much more useful. How much of Nolan's final decision did Shepard personally witness? And how much did he learn from other people after leaving Horn Island? Because those are not the same thing. If Nolan personally told Shepard that he was staying with the young woman, that is first-hand evidence of Nolan's intention then. But intention can change. A person can say they're staying, then decide 10 minutes later to leave. A person can expect another ride, then discover that ride is gone. A person can believe their friends know, when their friends believe someone else knows. That is why investigators reconstruct decisions, moment by moment, and why one friend's interview cannot close a death investigation, especially one where the medical evidence still has not supplied the answer. The independent autopsy found no fractures and no deep tissue injuries. It documented red discoloration on the back of Nolan's skull. The pathologist called that finding inconclusive and said it required further investigation because Nolan's body had decomposed and had already undergone an earlier autopsy. Important structures and organs had been removed. Dr. Roger Mitchell said those limitations prevented him from ruling out non-accidental factors. He classified the cause of death as undetermined, pending further investigation. So separate the questions again. Did Shepard correct misinformation about one viral video? Possibly. His account is specific, and investigators can test it. Does that tell us how Nolan died? No. Does Nolan leaving his phone aboard automatically prove something criminal happened? No. Does the family have legitimate unanswered questions about why Nolan never returned? Absolutely. And does Shepard's explanation settle those questions? It doesn't. In fact, it moves us toward a more important witness category, the people who were still there after Shepard was gone. Because somewhere between "I'll see you later" and Nolan never returning, the explanation breaks. Not necessarily because someone committed a crime, but because the public record has a gap, and now investigators have to fill it with evidence. Because the next question isn't what Tristan Shepard remembers before leaving, it's who saw Nolan after he did, and what those people told investigators may be the part of Horn Island. That changes everything. And what those people told investigators may be the part of Horn Island that changes everything. Because once Shepard leaves the island, his account stops being eyewitness evidence. From that moment forward, somebody else has to carry the story. And this is where you need to separate three very different things: what Shepard personally saw, what Nolan allegedly told other people, and what people later believed happened. Those are not interchangeable. Three of Nolan's friends, Warren Hudson, Jack Spatalo, and Morgan Seymour, have publicly denied any involvement in his death. Their attorneys have also denied wrongdoing. And as of right now, none of those young men has been charged in connection with Nolan's death. No suspect has been publicly named. That needs to be said clearly. Because asking questions is legitimate, threatening people is not. And several people connected to this case, including Nolan's family and his friends, have reportedly received threats. That helps absolutely nobody. It doesn't establish what happened. It doesn't produce reliable evidence. And it can contaminate an already difficult investigation. So forget the online verdicts for a moment. Go back to what can be tested. Shepard says Nolan chose to stay. Other friends have maintained that explanation too. Nolan had supposedly met a girl. He supposedly expected another ride, and the group believed he would return safely. If that is accurate, there should be supporting evidence somewhere. Not necessarily one dramatic piece. Maybe something much smaller. A A text, a photograph, a conversation overheard nearby. Someone hearing Nolan discuss another boat. Someone seeing him walk toward another group. Someone hearing him say goodbye. That is what corroboration looks like. You don't prove an account because four friends repeat the same conclusion. You prove it by finding evidence that developed independently of that conclusion. Notice this. Nolan's intention is not a minor detail. It is one of the central facts the entire separation explanation depends upon. Because there is a massive difference between these two sentences. Nolan decided to stay, and Nolan was left behind. One suggests a voluntary decision. The other suggests something went wrong. And right now, the public record has not conclusively established which happened. That is why Nolan's parents keep returning to something painfully simple. They knew their son. Christine Wells Wansley has publicly questioned whether Nolan would voluntarily remain with somebody he had just met, while his phone and keys left without him. Her argument is not forensic evidence. A parent's belief cannot determine cause of death, but it does explain why the family refuses to treat the girl explanation as the final answer. And there is another reason. According to the family's attorneys, there have been conflicting accounts about whether Nolan actually intended to remain. So suppose Shepard remembers Nolan saying he wanted to stay. That could be completely truthful. But what happened afterward? Did Nolan change his mind? Did he try to catch his original group? Did another ride fall through? Did somebody misunderstand what he meant? Did Nolan believe one boat was staying when that boat was actually leaving? Those possibilities sound ordinary, but ordinary mistakes can matter tremendously. On an island reached only by boat, and there is one piece of evidence that might help answer some of this. Not the viral fight video, not a social media reconstruction, the emergency towing call. The boat carrying Nolan's friends experienced a mechanical problem that afternoon. A call was placed to sea tow. The recording was later released, and almost immediately, people online began hearing things. Some listeners claimed they heard Nolan's name. Others believed they heard alarming statements, buried underneath the main conversation. Enhanced versions started circulating. Audio was slowed down. Frequencies were isolated. Captions appeared telling viewers exactly what they were supposedly hearing. And once captions appear, your brain has a problem. Because now you're not simply listening. You're being told what to hear. That is where forensic audio expert Jennifer Owen offered an important warning. Owen is not connected to the investigation. She told people that forensic clarification has to begin with the best original recording, not a repost, not a screen recording, not a compressed social media file, not somebody's enhanced TikTok version. Her warning was simple. Be very careful, because processing audio can reveal information, but processing can also introduce artifacts. Sounds that weren't meaningful originally can suddenly seem like recognizable words. And human expectation does the rest. Think about that for a second. If somebody captions a muffled sound, Nolan, how many times will you hear Nolan? Now remove the caption. Would you hear the same thing? That matters enormously here. Because if the original Cito recording contains a clearly identifiable reference to Nolan, that could help establish what people knew while that boat was still near Horn Island. But if the alleged words only appear after aggressive enhancement, that is something entirely different. Whether the call contains background voices is one question. Whether those voices say anything meaningful is another question. And whether those words relate to Nolan is a third question. Do not collapse those questions. The family has retained experts to examine that emergency audio. So has this recording exposed a crime? No. There is no public evidence establishing that. Could the original recording still matter? Absolutely. Because audio doesn't need a dramatic confession to become important. Maybe investigators identify who was present. Maybe they establish the mood aboard the boat. Maybe they determine when someone noticed Nolan missing. Maybe nothing relevant appears at all. That result matters too. Real investigations eliminate possibilities as often as they confirm them. And here is where Shepard's interview becomes unexpectedly useful again. Remember the fight video? Shepard says everybody misunderstood it. People thought Nolan was demanding his phone. Shepard says it was actually him yelling during his own confrontation. Now put that beside the towing call. Two pieces of media, both surrounded by online interpretation, both containing difficult audio, both being used to support larger theories. And in one of them, a person actually present says, "The internet got it wrong." That should change how you approach the second. Not because Shepard has proven anything about the CTO call. He hasn't. It should change your standard of proof. If social media can misidentify the person shouting in one video, then ambiguous audio somewhere else cannot become fact because thousands share it. That is the expert moment in this case. The evidence may be valuable, but only the original evidence, properly examined, can tell us how valuable. And that brings us to Nolan's phone again, because as of August 13th, something remarkable remained unresolved. Nearly a month after Nolan's family said authorities agreed to jointly examine the phone, that forensic inspection still had not happened. According to the family's legal team, the dispute was about how it would be done. The family says it wants a mutually agreed forensic examination, one involving official investigators and experts representing Nolan's family. Their attorney said they had discussed the digital forensics lab at Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College. FBI involvement was also discussed, according to the family attorney's letter. But the family says the district attorney later wanted the phone turned over to law enforcement. The district attorney's office did not publicly provide people a response to those specific claims. So be careful here. This is not evidence that authorities are hiding something, and it is not evidence that Nolan's family is refusing to cooperate. It is a procedural dispute over control and examination of evidence. But think about what that means. More than a month after Horn Island, one of the most discussed pieces of evidence still had not undergone the joint examination the family says was contemplated. And the phone may answer questions that memory cannot. Location information, communication history, photographs, application data, deleted material, if recoverable, account activity, potential timestamps. Maybe that examination changes everything. Maybe it changes nothing. But until it happens, nobody should pretend we already know. Does this look like panic or a plan? That question gets asked constantly about what happened after Nolan disappeared. But there is a problem. We still don't know enough to fairly answer it. Consider the friends' position. Their attorneys say the young men had nothing to do with Nolan's death. The friends maintain Nolan voluntarily stayed behind. They say his phone remained aboard because people were protecting phones from salt water. They say the boat had problems, which forced their departure. And they say they have cooperated with law enforcement. That is their position. Now consider the family's position. Nolan's parents say the story doesn't fit the son they knew. They question why he stayed. They question the phone. They question inconsistencies in accounts. They question the initial suggestion that drowning was the likely explanation. And they want outside experts involved. That is their position. You do not have to choose a team. That is not what evidence requires. You can hold both positions against the same objective record and ask which details survive, because something else has happened. While those questions remain unanswered, the public pressure has become enormous. Friends connected to Nolan say they have received serious threats. Their attorneys have discussed defamation lawsuits against people making accusations online. Nolan's mother has also faced harassment. She was even subjected to an anonymous professional complaint. That complaint was later closed. Whatever you believe happened on Horn Island, None of that identifies Nolan's cause of death. None of it replaces forensic work. And none of it gives strangers permission to threaten people. The only useful pressure is pressure for verifiable answers. That is exactly where Nolan's family is now taking this. On August 12th, the Congressional Black Caucus formally requested an independent federal review. The letter was addressed to Attorney General Todd Blanche and FBI Director Kash Patel. And notice the wording. The caucus did not declare murder. It did not name a perpetrator. It asked federal officials to independently review the circumstances of Nolan's disappearance and death. It also asked them to determine whether a basis exists for a federal investigation, including under applicable civil rights laws. That distinction matters. A request for federal review is not proof local investigators failed. It is not proof of a federal crime. It means lawmakers believe the unresolved questions justify another level of scrutiny. Congresswoman Lucy McBath said, "They want every stone turned because, in her words, Nolan's life matters. And as this video is being recorded, there has been no publicly announced federal conclusion answering what happened to Nolan." At the state level, the case is also not legally finished. Jackson County District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath has said the completed investigation will be presented to a grand jury. She has explained that deaths, other than natural deaths, and non-criminal vehicle fatalities are routinely presented there. So the existence of a grand jury review does not mean charges are inevitable. A grand jury examines evidence. It determines whether criminal charges are supported by that evidence. As of now, no one has been charged with causing Nolan Wells' death. That is the legal reality. The independent autopsy is also unresolved. Dr. Roger Mitchell found no fractures. No severe deep tissue injuries were identified, but the examination had major limitations. Nolan's body had already undergone the state's initial autopsy. Organs and neck structures were unavailable for Mitchell's examination. That matters because certain questions could not be independently evaluated, including questions related to drowning and possible neck injury. Mitchell also documented discoloration at the back of Nolan's skull. He described that finding as inconclusive, not proof of a beating, not proof of an accident. Inconclusive. His final position was equally careful. Cause of death, undetermined. Manner of death, undetermined. And he said, non-accidental factors could not yet be excluded. That sentence has been repeated everywhere. But listen to what it actually means. It does not mean the pathologist found evidence of murder. It means the available evidence did not allow him to eliminate that possibility. Those are completely different statements. And until the state evidence is fully incorporated into that review, the medical picture remains incomplete. Notice this. That leaves three major evidence lanes still moving at the same time: witness accounts, digital and audio evidence, and forensic pathology. None has produced a publicly established answer. That is why Shepard's story cannot be treated as the ending. His interview matters. It may correct misinformation. It gives context to the fight. It explains why phones were aboard boats. It offers a reason Nolan stayed. And it tells us Shepard's own movements. But there is a limit. Shepard cannot testify to something he did not witness. Neither can Nolan's parents. Neither can YouTubers. Neither can somebody enhancing muffled audio from a bedroom laptop. At some point, the evidence has to speak. And there is one detail from the beginning of this story that now lands differently. Remember Shepard saying he beats himself up every night? At first, that sounds like the emotional center, a friend wondering whether he should have stayed. But now you understand something else. If Shepard had stayed, he might have become one of the people capable of answering the question that still hangs over this entire case. What happened after the others left? Not what everybody assumed. Not what somebody heard later. What actually happened? That is the missing bridge. And until investigators build it, the most responsible answer remains, we do not know. For Nolan's family, that uncertainty has become their daily life. More than a month after his death, Christine Wells Wansley and Elmore Wansley are still asking the same basic questions. Why didn't their son come home? When did people realize he was missing? What happened after his friends left? And how did an 18-year-old athlete end up dead near Horn Island? At the National Association of Black Journalists convention, Nolan's parents again asked for truth and transparency. Their attorney Ben Crump said, that has remained their objective, not a predetermined verdict. Answers. And that distinction deserves respect, because Nolan's friends deserve not to be convicted by social media, and Nolan's parents deserve not to be told to stop asking questions. Both things can be true. Evidence should decide what comes next, not race-based assumptions, not viral videos, not online threats, not somebody's preferred theory. Evidence. Original video, original audio, witness interviews, forensic phone extraction, autopsy materials, toxicology, and whatever investigators have that the public has never seen. On August 19th, Nolan would have turned 19. Instead of planning that birthday, his parents are asking strangers to remember his name and help them understand his death. At his funeral, his mother said something much simpler than any theory about Horn Island. Nolan, we love you. We'll continue to fight for you. That is where this case stands. Treston Shepard has spoken. He has explained what he says happened before he left Horn Island. Some of his account directly challenges popular online claims. Some of it aligns with what other friends have said. Some of it remains disputed by Nolan's family. And none of it yet explains Nolan's final moments. So now that you've heard what Shepard actually said, what stands out most to you? The fight video? The girl? The phone? The emergency audio? Or the simple fact that Shepard's knowledge ends before the most important part begins? Because that was our question. How much did Nolan's friend personally know about why Nolan stayed? And how much of the story was pieced together afterward? We still cannot answer that completely. And until investigators can, Horn Island still holds the one answer Nolan's family wants most. What happened after his friends left? We'll keep following this case until there are real answers.